The Articulate Coven is the original, unofficial podcast and fan community for Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire and Anne Rice's Immortal Universe from AMC and AMC Plus. Welcome to the Articulate Coven. We are your hosts,
Ashley Wright-Eiler.
And I'm Joel Sharpton, and we are the Articulate Coven. Ashley.
Joel.
I did it. You and I both did a show, actually. We spent a little time in Southern Ohio doing an outdoor drama called Blue Jacket.
Oh, yes, we did.
And as part of the pre-show for that show, one of the extra jobs you could get as an actor is working the pre-show song little performance while the people are eating their dinner before they come down into the theater.
Yes,
you'd send some folks up there. You'd sing some classic folk songs, period-appropriate songs. And the one that I still remember to this day is Froggy When a Courtin'. Froggy When a Courtin' and He Did Ride. And I think you very well could have titled this episode, I love the beautiful poetry from Anne, don't get me wrong, but this one could have been, Lestat When a Courtin' and He Did Ride, Lestat When a Courtin' and He Did Ride, Antoinette's finger by his side, Lestat When a Courtin' and He Did Ride.
It was a beautiful ring on that finger, though. I don't blame Claudia for keeping it. She wasn't wearing it later, but I don't blame her for keeping it.
So if you haven't, if you don't know what you've stumbled into, this, by the way, is a unofficial podcast and fan community for Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire and The Lives of the Mayfair Witches from AMC and AMC Plus. We are here to talk about episode 6 of Interview with the Vampire, Like Angels Put in Hell by God, and we will be spoiling the episode. So if you haven't seen it,
here comes
you need
the
to
evil.
Turn back now. Beyond there be dragons. So let's get into it. First of all, and I haven't pulled the credits. Let me pull that up real quick on the IMDb website here. All right, so for episode 6, Like Angels Put in Hell by God, director was Levin Aiken, and Colin Hebert was the writer. Man,
excellent
this writing
work,
room,
everyone. Oh
this
man,
writing room
they're so
just
fun.
Continues
I would
to
love to
show off.
I would love to be a fly on the wall in there. Also, we need to look up, Joel, we got to start paying more attention to who the editor is of these episodes, because the editor plays such a huge part in the storytelling. And I this goes back to Breaking Bad for me, becoming obsessed with that show and listening to that Insider podcast that was hosted by their editor, Kelly Dixon. And it really got me paying attention to editing and such in shows, and especially something of this arc and this majesty. You know that the editor is working hard to get that 51-minute cut just where it needs to be, and not miss the good stuff, and let go of some of the things that maybe hard to let go of.
Oh, there's so much going on behind the scenes. So film editing on this one was Janet Weinberg is the credit for this episode.
Give it up for Janet.
The other thing that I want to call out here is the music from Daniel Hart.
Oh my, was the entire episode underscored?
So not just the entire, I believe the entire episode was, and honestly, the vast majority of the series has been scored. This episode especially, though, and I called it out right early here. One of the reasons why this whole episode sort of colored by the courting phase, which is honestly just the beginning of the episode, but the reason why that was so impressive to me was the soundtrack. The soundtrack, the score throughout the series has been fantastic, but in this episode especially, and in that sequence, through Louis' recovery and Lestat's courtship, there's this lovely little light tune that's playing. I mean, it felt like a European romance with Cary Grant as the lead or something, right? And obviously there's still heavy stuff going on there. Louis is incredibly, beaten and dismembered as the show begins, but goodness gracious.
I don't know that
it's so lovely. It's so fun.
Right. I don't know that I've ever been so aware of the music. I like that you call it a courtship. I'm going to call it love bombing, because that's what narcissists do in abusive relationships, Joel.
Well, and
Lestat's doing some love bombing. You love bomb me with a nice car.
7 years.
Yeah. Well, that's love bombing over the course of 2 months in a human relationship, maybe.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or 2 weeks of love bombing, probably more accurate for our guys here.
Some great line delivery in that sequence, though, from Sam as Lestat, especially.
He's perfect.
First and foremost, when he shows up with the gift, rings the doorbell, and Claudia answers, he says, I've been calling rather often. I'm not sure if the operator is putting me through properly. Yeah, I don't know if you're getting my text or not. But I have been trying to contact you.
I've been left on red. It's kind of uncomfortable.
It's such a crazy thing to watch him at work here.
The book that he brings there, number one, I love books. Like the physical of a book in the hand. And that would be like, you're going to woo me with books, asshole? Well, you're going to really probably get me then, you know? And that book was so beautiful. I was just wondering if there's any sort of like Easter egg I'm missing there about that particular book.
I haven't seen anything. I didn't recognize it particularly.
I didn't either. I
have not seen anyone call that out
completely
on
like
Twitter.
In love with it. I was like, well, yeah, I'd let you in for that book probably. Damn it.
Yeah, I got to tell you, like first of all, that is very much something that Louis would be into. I think book Louis especially.
Absolutely.
And it's also very much something that Lestat would do. It's lovely, which is the thing that he focuses on, not the contents of the ancient book, right? There's a book from the 1500s, but he's like, it's very, very pretty. Don't you see that, Claudia?
Look how gorgeous it is. Yes. Claudia is fantastic. Bailey Bass is so great in this episode. Claudia is seeing her as a caretaker instead of more of a child or that she's the young one being taken care of. Seeing that role reversal with her and Louis was just really fantastic.
So the other moment there in the early section that I thought was really, really something was in that same thing. He shows off the book. Claudia says, no one here wants to talk to you. You know, goodbye. Lestat says, well, let's let Louis speak for himself. Why don't you tell me? And he throws the coffin out the balcony onto the Rue Royale. First of all, it's the first jump scare of the entire series for me.
Right.
I literally jumped up and down when it happened because I was on edge based on last week's events and the fact that Claudia here is still like throwing daggers with her eyes at Lestat. I said, maybe somebody's going to get attacked here. No, the coffin explodes onto the street. And then I got a good belly laugh, honestly, once I realized there wasn't actual violence there. That's a good joke, and Louis not even there in the scene. You know?
So funny. And Lestat, Sam does this very just like little cut of his eyes to the left, and it was so brilliant. He played that so well. He didn't flinch, but it was just like, oh, okay, I see where we are.
I'm nothing without you. I'm nothing without both of you. Very different deliveries on the two lines. Both at the same time as he gives them the car, or tries to give them the car before Claudia scratches the hood and throws the keys away. My question to you is, do you think that Lestat loves Claudia?
No.
In the show?
No, not in this presentation at all. Like, I will say this is something that I think is really hitting home for me really hard. And I was thinking about it this episode, that more so than in the book even, I feel like Lestat is going to deserve what's about to happen to him. And I don't necessarily know that I felt that way in when I watched the 94 film. I don't even know that I really felt that way when I read the book, you know, for the first several times. But like this time I'm like, yeah, no, we're going to kill this guy and it's going to be a hoot, you know?
I think that is a central argument that will continue to happen about this series as we move forward, and that argument may grow more, you know, into a cavern instead of a little ditch between the fandom as the series progresses. Because that occurred to me this week. Last week we finished episode 5, and my wife turns to me and asks, "So tell me again, why do you all love Lestat so much?" And I said, "Well, you got to remember he doesn't do this in the books, right?" That was my first thing. And so this week, and we've had that discussion a few times this week, we finished this episode this week, episode 6, and she asked me again, she says, okay, I mean it, seriously now, tell me, why is it that you all love Lestat? And what I came down to in the final summation of it all is what it really boils down to is we all love Lestat because Anne Rice did.
Yeah.
Lestat was Anne Rice's favorite. He was her muse, and he spoke to her for the better part of 40 years and for all but, 3 of the books effectively. And because of that, we have this incredibly years-long journey with him over his centuries-long life. and we see all the shades of Lestat. We see him at his best. We see him at his most debonair and charismatic. We see him at his low points as well. But it's hard to encapsulate that in one season of one series from effectively only two characters' points of view.
Absolutely.
We've seen it from Claudia's point of view. We've seen from Louis' point of view.
Yeah.
And the question for me is, knowing that if we get good adaptations of all of these books as they move forward, Lestat must become a little bit more centered in the narrative in the future. Have we soured that possibility by giving Claudia and Louis so much reasoning for what's coming here in the finale?
No, I don't think so, because I think for the first time, I really feel like it was always supposed to be deserved, but this is the first time I'm really seeing it that way, because the point of view is so strong from the Claudia Louis perspective. And I think that's the difference this time when I'm reading it. I know as a reader that I'm about to go and see Lestat at his very, very high points, his very, very low points, his very, very hot, famous points, his very, very sad in the ground points. So, like, I understand that character has more of an arc. And it's also taking into account the fact that these characters are supernatural and otherworldly and live a much longer existence than we do. And I think in this world that Anne's set up, it's so important for them to be able to go hard bad, go hard good, go hard weak, go hard strong, because you need to see those dichotomies, and then you can flip and see it from a totally different perspective, and it's like a brand new character's talking to you. And that's why this never gets boring.
Well, the writers promised us to bring something new even for the book lovers. They wanted a modern adaptation that would work for mainstream TV, and I think clearly based on the ratings and the continued rollout of this and AMC Plus internationally. I read an article earlier this week. They rolled out into a bunch of international markets this month.
I hope that means some of our friends are getting to watch it that haven't gotten to see it yet.
Exactly. Should be available to more people soon as that continues. But that's largely on the back of the strength of this final season of The Walking Dead that's going on right now, and the beginning of the Immortal universe with Interview with a Vampire, which has been so successful. So, I guess you're right. And honestly, that very question, the idea that TV show viewers that haven't read the books or haven't read the books, already for 20, 30 years in their life,
right,
they're going to be coming to us with those questions. Why do you love Lestat? And so here we are as longtime fans having to wrestle with that very question. What is it about this character that is so enigmatic and so compelling for us? And we have to sort of wrestle with the true horror of many of the things that he's done and will continue to do as we go forward in the series. And guess what, folks? Don't be smug if you're not a Lestat fan. All of the other characters do plenty of bad shit too. We're all going to get our comeuppance eventually through the AMC lens, I think. I mean, already here, Louis has been given a spotlight on some of his own misdeeds, I think, pretty clearly. And the things that he and Claudia are now planning to do to Lestat, I think will also be given the same horror and directness that we were given with the attack on Louis an episode ago.
Absolutely. I think that those two are going to mirror for sure. I think that too, we have to see it and understand that it's a crime, going forward as kind of like a spoiler for, what happens in Europe and when they come across Armand, etc. Like we have to feel like this. Although we may feel like it's deserved, we still have to feel like this is wrong. So I'm very interested to see how it's going to all play out. But I think one of the things that's a little peek into the true character of Lestat is in the scene where Claudia and Louis are giving him their rules about, hey, we're going to get back together as a family, but these are the rules. And then a bit later, they ask him about his maker, and he tells the story that is true of his making. And it's one time that he's very genuine. It's very different portrayal than we've seen really Sam do a lot in the character, because it's such a vulnerable kind of moment. And I think it's kind of a little hint, a little kiss into what we're going to get later.
Oh, here's a perfect opportunity, Ashley. It occurs to me that you and I have not talked about this on the show. So several episodes ago, when we saw Claudia's diaries for the first time, there's a moment where one of the diaries is opened. Daniel opens it to a particular page marked with a rose. We noted in our episode the writing is different, the handwriting is different, and the text is actually directly lifted from the Vampire Lestat, the novel. It is the scene when he's trying to kill the wolves. His horse has been injured badly, and he has to put her down. That's the scene that's depicted in that moment from the diaries there in the show. We discussed it. Oh, goodness. He's already written in Claudia's diary.
Oh my
Isn't this going to be amazing? They're going to show Lestat's perspective. Maybe we'll even get it before the season is over. Friends, the writers came out on Twitter and said it was just a mistake. They screwed up somewhere along the way. Listen, you and I both come from the theater world. We're
friends also that crazy. We think everything matters, and it was a fucking continuity error.
Look, hey, it does happen. It was hard for me to imagine that something so bold and so clearly if anybody sees that in a screen capture, we're all going to lose our minds over it. And the fact that would still be allowed through the props person and through the editing department and the director and all the people who have to sign off on a project to have missed it.
They don't know how crazy we are, you guys.
However, turns out there was nothing to that. So here we do get another scene, and this is, I think, probably the third little glimpse. We've had the mention of Nikki before in the passionate violinist that Lestat had written a song for. We got the mention of his father and brothers and their brutality about the church and pulling him out of the church when he wanted to become a priest. That was at dinner with Mama Dulac. Now we've gotten the story of Magnus, and then later we do get a little bit more of the story of Nikki well.
Yeah.
But here, I think Magnus was for me a little bit of a heartwarming moment because it seemed like genuine sharing. Claudia and Louis are genuinely interested in where do they come from? What is the nature of vampirism in this world? What is your origin story? Because again, think about, I'll tell you in my own life. My mother has only in the last few years discovered, parent not expected, I think is the name that they use. She did a DNA test. It turns out her father is not her biological father. This was a alarming thing for she and I and my sister to learn, right? And so we've spent the last several years trying to discover who exactly this family was, learning a little bit about, he's also, our biological grandfather is passed as well, but learning a little bit about him, about the family that he comes from, connecting with some cousins. This is what effectively Louis and Claudia want to do there.
We all crave those connections. Yeah, we want to know where we came from. We want to know. Everybody wants that, I feel like, and it's harder for some of us than others to track down, and I think that's
Lestat offers his heart here. You can see it in his eyes. He tells them the truth. I say that. It's slightly different from the book version, only in that the book Magnus only kept him there one night. He didn't keep him, I think, for a week or 10 days or whatever Lestat says in the thing. And I believe Lestat didn't discover the bodies until after he had been turned into a vampire and Magnus was already gone, I think, in the book. So it's maybe slight variations there, but still the basic core of it, that he was kidnapped, was tortured, was forced into vampirism by Magnus, and then abandoned immediately by Magnus's jump into the fire. That's all from the Vampire Lestat. I mean, straight from it. That is the history. He
cries
of
that
Lestat.
That's not what he wants. That he asks, cries to God. Like he has all of those moments where those all are genuine moments. Even if he's God, and that's the thing. He's such a little shit, and he's referred to as a brat this time by Louis for the first time. And I'm like, yeah, finally. Oh, he's such a brat. It doesn't even seem to do it justice, but it is so apropos. He's a brat.
But that openness, that willingness to share from Lestat, even, obviously begrudgingly, because this is like in recompense for the harm that he's done to the family.
Right. And he's only doing it because it serves his purpose. I will say it's genuine sharing, but he's only doing it because it serves him.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right there. But that is immediately taken and used against him like a weapon by Claudia. With the Nikki comment especially, she knows a little bit about that. And so she just twists the knife into him. And like we've said previously with Lestat, where he can't help but get the last word, Claudia here cannot help but torture Lestat openly. She's already plotting his demise. Even I think as soon as he's welcomed back into the home, as soon as Louis comes back with him that very first night, I think Claudia's decided, I'm going to kill this motherfucker. But she doesn't know exactly how it's going to work. She doesn't know how to win Louis over to her cause, right?
Right.
And so she kind of limps along. But she still can't bring herself to offer the sweetness. Go back, think about when she returned from her college sojourn. We talked about how that initial thing that she says to Lestat, and then Lestat stabs her. Here they are. They can't. It reminds me so tragically. Now listen, I don't treat my son the way that Lestat treats Claudia. That's not what I'm saying. But these arguments between the two of them, because they are so much alike.
Oh my gosh,
ways.
absolutely.
This happens with my son, my 13-year-old son. He and I cannot walk down from a simple discussion sometimes because we are so much alike. We cannot help but push each other's buttons. And we might both even be aware of it and not want it. Now, unlike in this relationship, we're not actually acrimonious. We don't want to hurt each other.
Right.
But still, our natures call us to that. So here, when there is active animosity, Lestat wants her gone and out of the way. He is angry. Even here at the end, in the resolution of this episode, he's angry that he believes that Claudia would actually help and save Louis and that he couldn't do it alone.
Yeah, he hates it. That's one of the reasons
why it's one of the reasons why he brings her back with such violence, I think, is because he's sort of taken it out on her that he can't be what Louis needs.
Well, I also think he wants to scare her. I think he wants to scare her into staying for Louis. He can't have her running off anymore. He wants to terrify her.
Ashley, if Lestat had done what he did to Louis in last episode, would he have to make any grand shows to you to scare you into? I would never have run away. The bravery and the audacity that Claudia has and shows in this series. Claudia is not one of my favorite characters. I'm not a Claudia apologist, and yet I'm falling in love in certain ways with Bailey's portrayal, and I am again reminded of why this is such a compelling character and how I think a whole new generation of people are going to fall in love with her specifically, even maybe more so than our boys, because of the fact that even after last week's beating, she's gone. And fuck Lestat, fuck Louis too. If he can't be without him, I'm going to find happiness. I'm going to find freedom. I'm going to find a life for myself. Even after the harm that was done to her outside of their family in last episode, she's still making her way in the world, or trying to.
When no one chooses you, you have to choose yourself. And that's what she does in this. When she hasn't been chosen by anyone. And this is her opportunity to choose herself and to make choices for herself. And even when Louis sends her off and he says, "You're different now. You can smell trouble from a mile away." Even in that, he's giving her more power, more strength to make the choice to leave. He's pushing her away.
First of all, Ashley, we're not recording this on Sunday like we normally do. We recorded on Monday today.
I'm sorry, you guys. I lost my voice.
Don't even worry about that. I was just going to say, you're not supposed to take us to church on Mondays. We go to church on Sundays around here, so you got to stop with the knowledge bombs there.
Shows herself.
Listen, though, I said right in that scene which by the way, the title of that piece of the soundtrack is called "Sister, You Don't Need Me Anymore," I think is the name of it. It's something really lovely that Louis says there. Hang on, I got to pull it up.
Yeah, that underscore in this whole
"Hey
episode.
Sis, You Don't Need Me." "Hey Sis, You Don't Need Me." That's the name of it. Oh, I loves it. Daniel Hart, he's my new dude. So what I said about
is what every sister knows: your brother always needs you. Oh. Every sister fucking knows that. I've got a brother.
A true story.
I know my brother always needs me. You got a sister. I know your sister knows you always need her.
I
know?
do.
Fuck.
I do very badly.
Man, this is messing with us, Joel. Messing with us.
We've talked a lot about the million different ways that aging Claudia up was a good idea. We were always on board for that, for sure. This episode, again, makes it plain, though, one of their overarching ideas about why it was important to do that, why for the story does it matter. In this version, Louis says it there. "Hey, sis, you don't need me." Claudia knows it. Louis knows it. They're not locked together by Miss Birth in this telling of the story. They're locked together by love. They do love one another. They are compelled to share existence with one another. And they will do that as we move forward into season 2. And yet, it's not the forced nature of that relationship that it was in the movie or definitely in the book, where you have a 5 or 6-year-old or a 10-year-old as portrayed, who literally cannot move about society without an adult.
People would be like, "Why is this baby in the park alone?"
She'd keep getting arrested.
Like this actual 5-year-old. Like, people are like, Kirsten Dunst played the 5-year-old. I was like, no, she didn't. You were on drugs.
Yeah, friends. Listen, she was stretching 10, okay? Because she was a very pretty 13-year-old, I think, when they filmed that. So I did love that resolution. Although there's a confusing line in there, and I want to put it out there. Maybe I'm the only one that was confused by it. On my second rewatch, I thought it was a little bit clearer. The night that they say goodbye is also the night that Lestat returns her, right? Is that the way that it played out?
I read that as that. I read it that way.
I think that's the case. Louis has a line after she leaves. He tells Daniel that he contemplated meeting the sun that night. He was sitting there on the bench and thinking, oh, they'd just find a pile of ashes in my walking cane, and wouldn't that be interesting and scandalous, And he decides against it because long ago, Paul had ruined Grace's wedding night with his death. And he wouldn't do that to Claudia's escape. But he says specifically, I wouldn't do that for the anniversary of Claudia's escape. I guess when I rewatched it the second time, I think what they're trying to say there is, Louis was saying, I won't have her remember for years to come as she celebrates her escape from me and Lestat, that I also died that night.
I went to the sun that night, that she lost me forever.
But no time has passed there. She has not been on that train journey again for even a night or two.
Oh no, I took that as literally being like, she settled in thinking, booyah, I'm gonna make it, and then here comes Uncle Les with a puppet.
I think that's the way that it plays out. It was, like I said, it was a little hard for me to understand as they told it, but yes, I believe that that's the case. If somebody knows for a fact a different way, please let us know that in the comments or in your feedback. Okay, let's just talk all about that scene right there, because again, they put a trigger warning at the beginning of the show because of domestic violence. You know what? There's a scene we've skipped. We'll go back to that in a minute. Let's talk about the train sequence first, though, because we're right here on it now.
Right.
This is one of the most Lestat moments of the entire series so far.
It is so fucking
Lestat
wild.
Busting through the door, holding the head of the train conductor,
doing a silly voice,
wearing his hat. Doing a silly here again, like the German on their bayonets.
Oh my God!
Again, we get a Brooklyn accent this time.
And when they're playing Nosferatu after watching that, it reminded me of that immediately. I was like, oh fuck, yeah.
This is listen. Lestat is not cruel in the same way that was displayed, I think, last episode, and we talked about that. Book Lestat would not attack Louis in that way. But Lestat will prance around with a part of a corpse.
100%. He danced
around. The scene in the 94 movie where he dances
around
with
her mom?
That is from
still
the book,
life
friends.
in the old girl already. Yeah.
He is one who would dance with the dead, especially to freak somebody else the fuck out. And so that's exactly what he does here. He kicks in the door. He did tickets, please.
Oh, you could just hear the mayhem, like as he's leading up to it. It's
or
like,
when he jams the head into the wall to get it out of his way. He's like squinch.
Blood splatters everywhere. Oh, I love it.
But there's also a great moment in that scene too, which, by the way, lots of like double layered meanings there with their dialogue between Claudia and Lestat as they discuss,
well, and even too,
her
like,
coming back.
Brett loved my husband, unlike Kelly, your wife, my husband Brett is like, oh yeah, I'm Team Lestat all the way. And he loved this scene so much, especially when he let the dog out and he's standing there, he's sitting there having that conversation while he's letting the dog lick the blood off of his hands.
Well, I love it. He tries to wipe it first. He tells the dog to shush when he first walks in. He gets his handkerchief out and he's trying to wipe his hands. There's a lot of blood. It's very, very sticky. And he realizes, oh, there's a dog here. Why waste all of this? I'll let the dog out.
I like dogs.
The dog licks the blood off my hands. Also, yes, exactly. Let's talk about, by the way, and this is one of the things that I pointed out to Kelly as a little example.
Where
of
you're like foreshadowing, he's going to have a dog later.
Well, no. The dog likes him, though, right? The dog likes him, doesn't growl, doesn't bark, whimpers when he first comes in.
Joel, the dog likes the blood.
The dog's, well, I mean, yeah, sure, maybe. But the dog doesn't growl at Lestat. Meanwhile, let's go back to when Claudia and Charlie are screwing in the buggy. The horse is in the stable losing its GD mind, trying to break out because it knows the evil is about to destroy Charlie. I'm saying animals like Lestat. They do not like Claudia.
That is true, apparently.
Dogs know, Ashley. Dogs know who the good people are.
Dogs do know. And Lestat does have a dog later.
Well, he's got dogs earlier, too. They've already mentioned his mother gave him mastiffs.
Yeah, he had his
hunting.
Dogs. Yeah.
So he had dogs in life. He has dogs several times during his vampiric life, and especially, Tilla the Body Thief is the famous one. He gets Mojo is the name of the giant dog that he gets in that one. By the way, based on a dog that Anne actually owned in real life. So I think we're likely to get Mojo at some point. Not too soon, not too far off too. Let's go back to that previous scene. So as Lestat is finishing up his courting, the thing that finally breaks through 8 years into this separation and estrangement, which, by the way, I love how they have sort of massaged and changed these three, their life together. The period in the books is basically Lestat and Louis are together like 10 years, 15 years or something. Then they have Claudia, and they're together for like 40, 50 years in the books.
40, 50.
And then they all separate. Here, each group have had periods of contentment and separation a few times now. I think that is honestly more realistic, especially with the slightly compressed time frame. And it's true to all of these characters and the way that they interact with each other while giving it a little more explanation and reasonableness, right? Like for the mainstream audience who haven't read the books, who haven't lived in these characters' heads for 30, 40 years,
right.
This show makes their interactions with each other and the way they treat each other make a little bit more sense, I think, and make it more realistic.
Yeah, because we like these portrayals too. Like that's the other thing is that like I don't know that I've ever liked all of these characters this much. And that's saying a lot because I love these characters. And I just don't know that I never dreamed I would see someone playing Lestat the way Sam Reed is playing him. He embodies the character in such a beautiful way that it's just so hard not to get completely caught up in the bullshit.
Now that you say that, this is something that I saw come up on Twitter this past week, and I hadn't decided whether or not I was going to say something about it on the show because I don't want to get negative feedback if folks are really in love with this guy or with this crew that I'm talking about. Cody Fern, who played the Antichrist in the American Horror Story series, I think he's appeared a couple of times.
Oh, okay.
I think by a couple of times, I think he's appeared in a couple of seasons. That character has
anthology
recurred.
Stuff.
Yeah, but that's what he's primarily known for. He was apparently in heavy discussions with the show for the role of Lestat when this was at Hulu, back when it first started up there. And then that production fell apart. The rights eventually moved over to AMC, and now we ended up with this show. Nothing against Cody Fern. I think he would have probably made quite a good Lestat.
I'm just pretty sure Sam Reed is Lestat.
That's what Sam is just possessed. He's just so perfect. But even more than that, it occurred to me, and I'd never really thought about this before, because you and I talked, we had a whole episode actually about the Hulu adaptation that was coming at the time. And then in the interim, we never actually talked about the AMC adaptation.
Right, because we didn't think it was going to happen.
We didn't believe in it. Yeah, we talked about that before we came. The show had already died twice at that point, even in this little interim, and we were sort of burnt out. We thought it wasn't going to happen. All we'd ever get to talk about was the books. Well, now we know what has happened. I look at that and I think to myself, boy, it might not have even been bad, but it does strike me that a lot of the creative team, a lot of the creative crew for that Hulu adaptation would have likely come over from Ryan Murphy's crew, the American Horror Story crew and American Crime Story and all the different shows that they do, and they do most of them now with Hulu. That's a fine crew. They do very, very good work. However, I am very satisfied and very glad that what we got instead was a lot of the creative crew from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul.
Yeah, you can't beat that.
I mean, those are not the same genre at all. You know, this isn't a horror crew that comes into this primarily. What they are is a heavy drama crew.
Well,
they know
it's character driven.
Anti-heroes. Yes, they know about character-driven, anti-heroic stories. And that is what we have before us. This is technically horror because we're talking about vamps and ghosts and ghoulies. But folks, it's more about gothic romance. It's more about character drama. It's more about the nature of existing alongside one another for hundreds, thousands of years. And what would it take to build relationships that could last that sort of time frame? What would it take to build a personality for yourself that could withstand that march of time?
Well, just
the loss of all of your loved ones.
Right.
The loss of the world that you understand and the slow growth of a world around you that is all but incomprehensible. That's what this series is about. And I think that's the difference between what we could have gotten a couple of years ago with Hulu and what we are getting now with AMC. And I hadn't really thought about how lucky we are. This is the best timeline,
we are very lucky. Yeah, this is definitely it. We are in the preferred timeline. Yeah, absolutely. I am going back to, I know we were kind of on the brink of it talking about, I assume, Antoinette's air quotes, inverted commas, murder. Where he comes
even
back.
Before that, let's talk about the song. So, Ashley, have you ever had a paramour? Have you ever had a paramour write you a song?
Oh, man. No, not exactly. But I've had some sort of bullshit similar to that. And it just fucking crawled all over me. I have never been so annoyed. Yeah, because it's the kind of shit, that manipulative bullshit. And then, of course, he gets his lady friend to fucking sing. That just, Joel.
So here again, that's exactly where
what a dick.
I think they weren't perfectly clear, though, because I saw a lot of people on Twitter get this wrong. Here's the sequence of events. Lestat writes a song for Louis. Come to Me, by the way, is the name of the song.
It's
Where
lovely.
does that come from? Let's go back. Episode 1 of this series, as Lestat confronts Louis at Paul's funeral. They're marching there. No, get away from me. He goes to the funeral. Mama Dulac disowns him effectively. He goes, he gets drunk. He tries to find Lily. Lily's dead. He goes to the church. Please, God, save me. The devil's got his roots in me. And then he ends up turning to a vampire because Lestat has been telepathically calling him the whole time. What does Lestat call to him? Come to me, Louis. Come to me. The music that's playing in that scene, by the way, on the soundtrack, it's titled Viens à moi, which is French for come to me. It's like poetry, Ashley. It rhymes. That motherfucker has been saying come to me the entire time for their relationship. This is the refrain.
Yeah, but he can't just fucking say it, Joel. He has to fucking manipulate him. He has to send him songs and poems and bullshit.
People miss it. There are two versions of this song. The second version that Daniel and Louis and Rashid and Dr. Fareed, which we'll get to in a little while,
love.
they all are listening to in modern day Dubai. That is a re-recording at some later unspecified date with only Lestat's voice.
Mm-hmm.
That's the version that we hear. It's a full orchestration and Lestat's voice. That's what we hear on the soundtrack itself. The version that they play in the show that Louis gets from Lestat in 1937, 38, whatever it was, and is playing in the room and then takes across the Mississippi River and breaks for Lestat and Antoinette. That version didn't have Lestat's voice on it at all.
It had Antoinette's. Oh my hell, God. Motherfucker.
You gonna write me a song and get your lover to sing it.
Mm-mm.
Are you fucked in the head?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are fucked in the head.
On the flip side, though, Ashley, he hadn't crossed that river until he got that vinyl.
Oh, you shut up. That is a terrible reason. Never cross a river for a record. Ladies and gentlemen, never cross a river for a record.
Lestat got fucked, though, didn't he? That's all I'm saying.
I mean, it kicked her out of her own fucking house.
The balls on these two. To tell this woman to get out. She's like, it's my house.
Well, and then
he
said there's three of them. But there were three of you, and you see the three of them, Lestat, Louis, and Antoinette, and then you see the next thing you see is Claudia, and it's like,
Daniel,
there are always fucking three of you, no matter what. You can't just be a couple. You've got all these fucking intertwining relationships.
Well, and if anybody happened to watch the last scene in this episode, there might be 3 of you in the future as well that cause some problems back and forth. Who could it be now? Who could it be? I love this. I love this whole part with Antoinette. Let me ask you this, because again, the fandom is confused.
Why did they cut her finger off? For real? Couldn't you just cut someone else's fucking finger off? Brett was he just smelled it.
No, homie, I think somebody is a Big Lebowski fan and they wanted to zoom in and show the missing digit. I think that's a direct reference to the Big Lebowski where they cut off the pinky toe for the nihilist.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
My question to you is, has Lestat turned
her
Antoinette
yet
at this point?
I don't think yet.
Yes.
I don't think yet.
I don't think so either.
I think he's just munching on her. I think she knows. She said, "You've made your promises," or something to that effect. I think he's told
promises
her
were
he's
made, promises will be kept,
and that's their deal. That's their arrangement. She's going to do what she has to do to let him get happy again with Louis. But she has her fucking agenda, and it's to be a famous singer. And she knows she can't do it there. But once he turns her, she'll have a lot more options.
Well, let's give a slight critique then here, because I like so much about this show. Let me tell you a place where I think they kind of slipped up a bit. Antoinette, and the same thing was true for Grace in the last episode, they do not do the aging of the mortal characters quite as well as I would like. Antoinette should look older here. I mean, they've been together at this point almost 20 years by the time we see Claudia and Louis discover them together there on the stoop. Antoinette's got to look older than that. Grace, last episode, 20 years older than the start of the show.
But
she's got to look a little bit older than she did.
She did pretty much look the same. Yeah, that is a good point. I didn't really think about that, and I think because it's just I don't think that I'm clocking the passage of time accurately. But I also think that that's something that they want. They don't want us to be able to clock it exactly. So I think maybe some of that, well, I'm giving that probably too much credit, saying that's on purpose. They're just wanting to kind of disorient you and not realize.
Well, no, that kind of makes sense. So if you think about it, in the way that time washes over these vampires, there's a line in the Lord of the Rings show that I just finished recently. By the way,
so good! Holy shit!
It's so much better than anybody told me about. I posted on
God.
Twitter. I thought it was just kind of okay.
Oh no,
the third and fourth episodes. It's a slow build, but the third and fourth episodes are great hooks, and then from there, it is excellent. It's everything you want from a fantasy show.
There's Lord of the Rings,
even kid friendly.
Yeah, there's Lord of the Rings swords around my house, so no one ever had to convince me that was a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. But in particular, there's a line in that show where Durin and God, what is his name?
Elrond?
The half-elf. Elrond, yes. Elrond and Durin are speaking, and Elrond hasn't come to see him for quite some time. Durin's all pissed off, and it occurs to Elrond 20 years is nothing for an elf. Elrond doesn't feel like he hadn't been there in that long, but for Durin, he's had children, he got married, Elrond's missed all of this stuff in his life.
Yeah, you missed all these important things in my life that are just...
Same thing for vampires here. These vampires, a year, it took 3 years for Louis to recover, and it wasn't that big a deal for him and Claudia. They were separated from Lestat for 8 years here, and in their minds, when they're talking about the relationship, I think Louis would largely think of himself as with Lestat this entire time, because 8 years ain't nothing when you're going to live forever.
Absolutely. Without a doubt. Time passage really has little to no meaning in this world.
That scene, by the way, where they break in and hate fuck at Antoinette's house.
Oh, my God.
It has my second favorite line of the whole episode. You swam the Mississippi to find me? Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. Lestat. Oh, I love you. The look on his face.
Oh, yeah. He's so pleased.
He is so pleased that Louis came for him.
Yeah.
And honestly, we've talked about it. Louis given him so little reinforcement for these feelings. He's given him so little push. I mean, he does fuck him occasionally, it turns out. But other than that, he won't tell him he loves him.
But he doesn't tell him to leave.
Lestat wants so bad.
But
he'll never tell him to leave.
Tells him to leave.
And here, what does he do? He swims the Mississippi. He goes for his man. He kicks Antoinette out. He kicks Lestat's ass too, but he also screws him and then brings him home. You know, so he gives him the ass whooping that Lestat deserved, which I loved. I think and also I think Lestat kind of enjoyed that too. That's Lestat's personal bag of shit that he's bringing to the table. But, you know, I mean, he stabs him there right at the beginning. He bites him at least twice. There's 2 sets of bite marks on his neck when they're having the conversation later about the rules. So, this was a serious moment of domestic violence as well.
True that. I also thought it was very interesting. I feel like Lestat should have healed fairly quickly from those wounds. So it sort of made me feel like, is he choosing not to focus on his healing powers? Like, that's kind of how it made me think. Like, is he choosing to stay, like, in this appearance of being injured to invoke sympathy from them? Because
that is interesting.
To me, I felt like, for him, like, I get it's just going to take Louis a while to heal up.
Especially like, broken bones.
Oh my God!
Internal
you
injuries,
just fell from the heavens. I love the way they addressed the cloud gift. By the way, like they just were like, "Here's the deal," and they explain it, and they're like, "This is exactly what it's like," and it's not like Superman. That's a fictional character, and none of this is fiction.
His description, Louis' description of it, is almost directly out of the books, by the way. It does feel like floating. It does feel like just based on your will, you just will yourself higher. And that's about all of the explanation of it that Anne gives.
That we ever really get.
There was an interesting discussion on our Facebook group about...
which, by the way, you guys are freaking awesome.
Aren't they fantastic?
I freaking love our conversations on there. I'm sorry I haven't been more engaged this past weekend, but I'm ready to romp, especially in our kind of in between seasons where we can really speculate.
Well, but the question that came up in particular that I thought was relevant here is the nature of scientific answers to some of these miracles. And we get some, especially as the books go on, Anne has periods where she becomes very scientifically interested, I think, and so she adds a little bit more of that to her writing.
Yeah.
And then she phases back out of it a little bit too. But I think at the core, Anne is very much a liberal arts person. She's not a scientific student. That's not her background. That's not her love. That's not her passion. It's not her knowledge. And so even if you explain the nuts and bolts of, for instance, nuclear physics or Newtonian, not Newtonian physics, but like, what's the quantum mechanics, for instance, quantum mechanics. If somebody's explaining quantum mechanics to me, even if you're breaking it down for a child, it's all still going to basically sound like magic to me at the end of it. And like, even if you give me a real description, I'm like, and that's miraculous. And I feel like that's the angle that Anne comes from. And I think that's the universe that she's created here. That's the sort of rule set. Somebody asked a question about how fast do vampires in her books heal? It's not instantaneous, even for the very old ones. The very old ones are all but impervious, though, right? Like, you can't, if you're an ancient, you effectively can't be harmed by anything. Punches, even being stabbed by things, it almost doesn't.
It almost does more harm to the person trying to inflict it upon
to the object or the person, exactly, unless that harm is being inflicted by another ancient, right? So in that case, Louis' injuries here and the long recovery would make sense. Lestat's injuries, particularly when you think about how much stronger he must be here than he was in the book.
And they just seem so like innocuous. Like it's like a little cut above his eyebrow. It's like, it's nothing serious. It's nothing like what we saw Louis' busted ass looking like at the beginning of the episode. Like, it's a very mild. So part of me just felt like he has to be letting this linger on purpose somehow.
Yeah, right. There's a little bit of a put on.
A little sympathy play.
I will say, it did seem to me like literally they got out of bed, put on clothes, and then came back across the river to tell Claudia that he was moving back in.
Yes.
Pretty much. Like, that seemed like it was almost immediately afterwards.
Yeah, or maybe this was the night after his return, like she was already in bed when they got home, and now we have to have a big conversation the next day about why you took your asshole boyfriend back for the 900th time, even though they cheat on you constantly.
Question for you here. What were the first 3 rules? When we joined that scene, that scene, Louis says, rule number 4. And
kill
Claudia
Antoinette.
Tells them they've got to kill Antoinette. Exactly.
Yeah. What are those first 3? And rule, and then we have you can't lie by omission or by by omission or by exaggeration.
Yes. And then I think they add one in a scene after that where they're all going to kill human. If they hunt, they hunt human.
That was a great scene, by the way.
Well, good example there of Lestat.
You make us feel shitty about eating people. Can we just eat people without feeling guilty?
Good example there of Lestat using the new paradigm to turn to his favor, right?
Yeah.
He's like, okay, we're like a council here. No leader. We're all together as equals. Interesting. 2 of us like to eat people and 1 of us don't. Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that for a minute. That'll be fun. That's less about me and more about you, Louis. Let's shift the focus.
I like that a lot. I also loved Claudia's response there when she baws at him because he said it's the sheep leading the shepherd dog,
yes.
you know. And so she's like, oh, bah. I won't even speak to him.
Brilliant. I love her. Her performance in this episode was fantastic. The 2 of them at the chessboard was just chef's kiss to me. It was just such a great scene. They were so well matched. You're seeing her really come into her own. What's fucked up is that she thinks she's really, really matching him, and she has no idea how out of her realm he is. She's at this point where she's like, I'm figuring him out. I've got this shit together. Louis, we're gonna kill him. And he is so even though she beat him at chess, he's still playing a whole fucking different game than she is.
Well, I did love that. That whole chess scene was... Here's another example. You mentioned earlier the move in the camera from Antoinette as the third wheel to Claudia as the third wheel. That was an excellent editing move. Here, too, this entire scene as the tension builds over the chess game, but we're also going back and forth and getting the telepathic conversation between Claudia and Louis, which, by the way, I'm 100% on board now. I think the creators did the right thing by giving them the mind gift. This is also, it occurred to me, that's going to come into season 2 as well, as Louis and other parties begin to have perhaps secret conversations outside of the hearing or knowledge of Claudia. And
right.
That relationship sours, I think. That occurred to me in this episode, too.
Well, it's really, it's setting up all of these, betrayals that our next betrayal is going to mirror the previous one. It's literally, we're repeating the same fuck-ups over and over and over again through, the next 1,000 years, just in a different version of it.
Absolutely, through the decades.
Thank God they're here to fuck it up so we can watch.
Right. What would we do? What would we do if those? Oh, damn it! I was going to make a joke about Dallas, and I can't remember the name of the family now. The Ewings. What would we do if those Ewings weren't selling oil in Dallas? Right?
If these vampires weren't screwing in Louisiana, what would we do with ourselves, Joel?
All right, let's get to the wrap up of this episode. That chess scene builds to a conclusion, and Claudia makes her revelation there. She says she's got a secret. I know a secret, something that nobody else knows, something that you don't know. That secret is you want to kill him too.
You want to kill him too,
and you're going to enjoy it.
And then I love how that segues. That conversation starts with her and Lestat playing chess. She starts talking to Louis then, and then it transfers to where she's in her coffin. Louis and Lestat are in bed together, and they're still having this conversation. Lestat would be furious.
Oh, dude, not anybody would be.
How many dare
times?
You?
Listen. Everybody's had that moment in a relationship where you're going to town and you realize somebody else is not here.
Making a grocery list or something.
Or thinking about their mother-in-law or, their performance review tomorrow at work.
Right,
or,
whatever.
Or maybe they're mad at you, but whatever reason, they're not there with you in that moment. Lestat knows. He might not know he's talking to Claudia right then. He probably doesn't know that they're contemplating murdering him, but he absolutely knows that Louis is not checked in.
I also think, and maybe in his insecurity, he's going to assume that if Louis is distracted, it's because of Claudia. Because he's in that kind of fight or flight jealousy mode with her. And I think that's so anytime he feels any sort of break with Louis, he's going to blame it on her.
Well, and he can't. Lestat is not capable, I don't think, of believing that he's bad for Louis. You know, that there is I don't think Lestat is capable of believing that this relationship is sour and maybe isn't what either one of them deserve right now.
He made Louis for himself. Come on now.
As he said, it took him almost a century to try again. Like that little reveal in this episode,
it took me so long to pick lovely. You. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, but that crescendos, and now Louis says it to himself. We were going to kill Lestat. And he repeats it for emphasis because he's making a point to Daniel. We were gonna kill Lestat. And Daniel is fucking asleep.
Passed out. Bless our guy.
So we didn't mention it. Dr. Fareed shows up earlier to administer I guess is it chemo? No, not chemo. It's Parkinson's drug, right?
Yeah, and I think they talked about a previous time it sounded like they were doing like vitamin supplements and things like that. I'm not really sure what this was, but yeah, I love this doctor character. He's the whole time he's like, I'm not here. I don't exist. I don't talk about my patients.
Little hint here for folks. This character is a character from the books. We'll talk more about that in the Easter egg section at the end of the episode. But Fareed is a character from the novels. Super exciting introduction there. And I think they're hinting at a whole lot with that character especially. Daniel, though, falling asleep, I thought was a really cute moment and a nice...
And they're like, order him a blanket. Give him a fuzzy blankie.
It's like a punctuation to this episode and last episode. We've had this huge buildup of like tension and drama and violence.
Yeah.
And oh my God, they're going to kill Lestat.
Everybody needs a fucking nap.
It's going to end in murder. And what are we going to do? We're going to nap is what we're going to do.
We need a nap.
Yeah, it's great. But the nap also is the narrative spur to allow us our flashback sequence. We've been talking about this all season. We knew that we were going to get a glimpse at a young Daniel. We talked about the audition tape that leaked on YouTube or whatever from that actor. Here, finally, we get it. We get the scene. First of all, did you recognize...
Good.
Did you recognize as they zoom into San Francisco, it's a shot almost directly mimicked from the 94 movie?
Yes, 100%. Number one, also, okay, yes, it was totally like a pull from the movie. And it totally felt so 70s. Like I have a photograph that was taken like from the car in Reno, Nevada when I couldn't have been more than like 3 or 4 years old, but it's like lights reflecting and a dashboard and cigarettes. And it was just like, it's just the most 70s Polaroid you can imagine. And that's immediately what this reminded me of. I was like, holy shit. They just like grittied this all up and like in a flash.
So we follow Daniel as he enters the bar. What was it? Polynesian Mary's. He enters the bar, goes directly to the bar itself, sits down. And
recognized by the bartender.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that for a minute.
Teased about not having money.
He argues with Louis earlier and says, no, I wasn't gay. I was just there to score drugs. It was an easy place to score drugs. Yeah. It happened in there. Who cares that it was a gay bar, blah, 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 whatever. No, this guy is there on the regular.
Yeah.
And not just that, but is sort of a nuisance because he's generally there without cash. He comes there at least to score drugs, and he knows part of the way to score drugs is because he's going to hook up with somebody. Now, whether or not he is personally pursuing those relationships, I suppose you could still argue, but I say the way that he looks at Louis in this episode, the way that he looks at the other person that's in this scene here, I say Daniel, at this point, very much a gay man.
Well, and at the very least, he's using that interview ploy to get what he wants.
Yeah.
Like at the very, very minimal, what we're getting is this guy has got his get. He's either using that to get ass or to get drugs and ass, whatever.
Both. Yeah, absolutely. Let's get the whole
hookers
combo, friend. So the big reveal, of course, though, in this, first of all, let's talk about Louis' hair and
oh
outfit.
My God.
He looks so fantastic.
Can he please be in I need to see Louis in every decade.
Yes.
In every time
show
period.
Me Jacob Anderson everywhere. He looks so fantastic. In the modern day, he's cool. In the 70s, he's cool. Also, he looks so happy here. Louis in the modern day storyline is so somber. In the old storyline, he's depressed. He is so happy in
he
this
does
moment,
this
or at
smile.
least he's portraying it.
He smiles at Daniel, and then he crinkles his nose. Like he smiles and then crinkles his nose, and I was
or
like,
when he says he's a vampire.
Yeah,
He says he's a vampire, and then
I'm
he
a
laughs.
vampire.
The way that he laughs it off is so, it's like childish and
Yeah.
young and flirty. Yeah,
It
ooh,
is. Yeah,
I am into this Louis a lot.
Yeah, I felt the exact same way. I was like, this is either a really exciting time for Louis, or he's in that place, that dark place where he's like, fuck it, I don't know what's going to happen, but here we go. I might end up in the sun before the end of tonight.
So they agree. They're going to go to Louis' house, which is not very far on Divisadero Street. And
Love the way he said that, too.
I know, right? They're going to do their little interview. If anything else happens, Daniel's cool with it, but you know.
But yeah, whatever. Here for the
then
interview.
Louis says, "What do you think? Is that okay with you? Do you want to join us?" And his companion steps forward. Who is his companion in the 70s? It's Rashid.
It's Rashid. Yeah. Now everyone's like, Rashid's Armand. Like, definitely. And I don't know. I still don't think it's true.
It is more likely than not. I mean, the
I
simplest
know, but
answer,
I don't
like
like
Occam's
it.
razor.
I don't
Occam's
like
razor
it.
says that he's Armand. There is absolutely
I'm
still
gonna
the
like
possibility.
it. I'm probably gonna like it eventually, but right now I'm like, oh, I don't really like this, but I'm probably gonna be fine.
Here's how they could talk me into liking it, right? This very much implies that something happens between them, and Daniel has been mind wiped, right? Like,
yeah, he can't remember it.
mesmerized so that he can't remember this. He didn't even know Rashid was there until this moment. He wakes up from the dream and recognizes it.
But also, is it just a dream?
That's true. Yeah, that's true too. Is it just a dream?
I'm like with the people on Twitter. They're like, "Can Rashid just be Rashid?" Jesus.
So I still think there's a few possibilities. He could be some other very old vampire. There are a handful that would make sense in different ways and that would connect to some of the storylines that we think they're leading to. He could be there's a group of characters in the very later books, the Prince Lestat books, called the People of the Purpose. He could be one of those people. Possibly. I don't think so, though. I don't think I don't
think they would go that far ahead right now.
I agree. That's jumping a lot of things
that's like
and bringing in a
13 books ahead, right?
Yeah,
like
there's a lot to get there
like
before
that.
Yeah. So I think the most likely answer is that he is in fact Armand or some version of Armand. Why is he using the name Rashid? Why have they done this whole song and dance for Daniel's benefit? Now, Ashley, doesn't that call into question the entire, like everything that we've heard about why Louis is doing this, the warning that it is to the world? Rashid has said that it's a suicide attempt by Louis' part. All of that is called into question for me.
Suicide
if they're both
by
lying
vamp.
about the nature of their relationship with Daniel already, right?
Oh.
And so that calls into question the whole 9 yards.
Well,
I do think we'll get the answer in episode 7. Thank goodness. I don't think we're going to leave this lying.
If
and I
those
do think
bastards cliffhanger us like that,
Right?
I will beat a bitch.
I'll say this. If you think about where where Louis and Armand are at the end of their relationship in the book, you know, they get together at the end of Interview with the Vampire and they sort of ride off into the sunset, except not really, because they're not happy with one another.
Right.
long-term.
They end up going their separate ways, don't they? Don't they separate?
Yes, they do. They part for quite a while.
Yeah.
That was the dynamic that I saw with Rashid as Louis asked him, "Do you want to join us?" And Rashid says, "No, have your fun," and walks away. And to me, in that moment, I thought, boy, that's a lot like what happens when Armand and Louis sour on each other, isn't it? Louis like, "Hey, let's go over here and let's do this and let's do that." And Armand's like, "Why don't you love me like I want you to? Why don't you want to go to all of the museums in Europe? Why don't you teach me about this thing called the telephone?" You know, like I very much do think.
I love how disparaging you are of Armand.
He's a real shit. I like him too. Don't get me wrong, but he's a real shit.
No, 100%. What a dick. But
also, as a guy who kind of thinks Armand's a shit, the fact that Louis has been making him play his houseboy for this entire entourage,
that is very satisfying.
I'd be very much down with that if that ends up being true. So,
like he's making his
spoilers
amends
there. But folks, you've got to be wondering, like, something's up with Rashid. We're telling you that's one of the possibilities. He could be our sort of season 2 villain.
He also walked through sun again this episode, but we all know that they just kind of sizzle. So who the fuck knows?
Right, and what do the ancients do? You know, we know that the ones who have lived a millennia or longer Yeah, they don't even notice it in the book. So maybe they don't even sizzle. Maybe and here's
not.
the other thing too. We know that the panels can be turned on and off.
Yeah. Well,
can they be allowed in some version of sunlight that the vampires aren't affected by? So it
well,
looks
and
like
I think in this episode they set that up. It really felt like that. Like Daniel and the doctor were at one point in what seemed like natural light, and then Louis was sitting across from them in obviously the artificial light, and Rashid was over in the corner also in the artificial light. And then he passed quickly through the natural light, but kind of stuck towards the wall. So where it was a quick pass, and then he was in the shadows again. So I don't know. I think at the very least they're just messing with us. At the very most it's Armand, and I'm going to have to wrap my head around this introduction.
Y'all, next week, the trailer, they're going to Mardi Gras.
It is gonna be so much fun and so much death.
It's gonna be hellacious. A quick schedule update here. We have talked on the show before. We thought we were going to go 2 weeks in between episodes, as there had been a rumor somehow spread that AMC was going to make the streamers and the cable folks sync up for the finale.
I
that
wouldn't
is
have
not
minded
true.
that if it was the truth, but I'm glad
I wouldn't
it's
have minded
not.
either. I'm glad I'm not having to wait an extra week. I will say this. If you're a cable viewer, you need to know that. And for me, I'd go radio silence starting next Sunday morning.
Yeah, guys.
You need to get off Twitter. You need to get off Facebook and just wait the week, I'm afraid.
Jump on
until,
yourself
the show is finally available for you on cable, because we're not going to be able to not talk about it.
No. And jump on or maybe jump on a 7-day trial and just get it early, like, do
That's
a week
not a bad
free
idea
trial.
either.
I'm not above suggesting that. Do what you
Absolutely.
got to do, friends.
Absolutely. And then you can still watch it again on cable as they finish it off on the 13th. But that means that we will have our finale discussion next week, and then on the 13th we'll release an episode where we talk about the season as a whole. We're going to do some feedback from our listeners and our followers on Facebook and Twitter, and we'll talk a little bit of speculation at that point for season 2. Then we'll probably go into a hiatus for a few weeks as we prepare and await the launch of the Mayfair series.
Damn witch book.
Yeah, finish that giant book that Harry Hamlin refuses to read. Boo on you, Harry. We're going to do it.
Boo, Harry.
Do your homework, bud.
I've already read it. I'm reading it again. Like, it's a grade for high school. Get it together.
So there you go. That is this episode. It was a good one. A big twist at the end. Big surprise. Lots of folks had theorized in different ways that this was coming. We talked about whether Rashid's a vampire. We've been back and forth on it. Yes, he is. No, it looks like he's human. Maybe he's one of these other things. Where could it go?
Also, the asshole's always wearing gloves. Like,
I mean, now I think he's got to be hiding his fingernails, right? Surely he's hiding his glossy fingernails, but
how are his eyes not so charming and sparkling?
That's right. Why doesn't he have the fancy vampire eyes? Exactly. I don't know. We're going to get our answers hopefully, though, starting next week with the season finale.
I'm ready.
What a blessing to be here and get this amazing storytelling. I want to move to some Easter eggs. So if you are not a book reader and you don't want to be spoiled with speculation more than we already have been, now's your time to bounce off. Ashley, let's dive into it. First and foremost, let's talk about Dr. Farid. Dr. Farid is a character that appears for the first time in the novels in Prince Lestat. He's actually brought into the vampiric world as or by the biological son of Akasha. Akasha has a biological son named Seth. He's one of the children of the millennia. He's been around for a long time, or actually he's one of the first brood, I think, technically. And Seth creates Dr. Farid. Unlike, effectively, every vampire in Anne Rice's universe, who are all created for their beauty and for love, generally, right? The vampires find somebody who is gorgeous, or they find somebody they fall in love with, and they turn them into vampires. Mm-hmm. In this case, Seth went out and found someone who was incredibly intelligent and scientifically minded. In particular, he wanted someone who could study and ascertain the nature of vampirism. And that's what he got in Dr. Farid. Dr. Farid is turned into a vampire and then is involved in a few different storylines involving the blood and the nature of the blood and how it changes vampiric bodies and how it affects them moving forward. So he should not theoretically be presented to us, the listener, the viewer, the reader, at this point in the storyline. However...
Or in broad daylight.
Right. Well, that's the other thing. He's probably not a vampire yet, I would say. This presentation of him is actually congruent, though, because in the story, he was already working with vampires. Seth had already brought him in, and he had a relationship with Seth and was doing things for Seth, experiments for Seth, in between the Queen of the Damned storyline and Memnoch the Devil storylines. That's where Farid's vampiric story begins, even though we, the reader, don't learn about it until the Prince Lestat. I won't give you more than that because you haven't read that book yet either. That's right. So, but that's who that character is. He's got a lot of part to play, and to me, the idea that he's on the board, we're still thinking this is pre-Queen of the Damned. The idea that he's on board before we have to tackle Akasha and that whole storyline, I think is really, really exciting and offers some interesting options for our heroes as they try to save the world.
All I could think about when he was introduced was in Hamilton when they say you have the doctor turn his back so he can have deniability. That was like, I kept saying, I'm not here. Nope, that's not my voice.
It was very nice to not have met you.
It was very nice
he
to not
said to
met
no
you.
one. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
I love the actor, by the way. That I think that's a really good portrayal. And boy, could they find two more attractive brown men than Farid and Rashid in this show, by the way. They were both on Showcase here.
These
are good-looking fellas left and right.
I feel like we are getting delivery on good-looking humans across the board. Congratulations, viewers. Here are your sexy vampires and vampire friends, vampire-adjacent friends, and they are all good-looking, just like you wanted. And none of them sparkle, which is better.
We shine on our own. We don't need to sparkle.
That's right. We don't need to sparkle.
Okay, so that's the first one. The second one, Rashid. Who could Rashid be? There are other options out there. Seth, for instance. It could be Seth because he has that relationship with Dr. Farid, and he is a very ancient vampire. Maybe would make sense that he would be tied to, Eastern religions. I don't know. That's a possibility. I think the answer, though, is Armand.
I think so, too.
It only makes sense that he would be. I mean, if you look at the timeline, the fact that we're going to Europe in the 40s, the idea that that Louis and Armand would still be together in the 70s absolutely makes sense. It also makes sense that would be when they were souring, right? That would be the departure there. And then the other thing that leads me to question
also might be a time where Louis would have more confidence because he's with a different partner,
and he's far enough away from the events of the first novel that he's got a little bit of closure there, and yet whatever modern day circumstance has changed things for him hasn't arisen yet, so also he's still killing humans at that point. He said earlier he hasn't killed anyone since the 2000s, so in the 70s he was still killing people.
He's still killing people.
The other thing that I want to put in there as far as like the Rashid question goes, if it is Armand, then it leaves open the door to that relationship between Armand and Daniel from the 70s.
Absolutely.
As it appears in the novels, right?
Or it could even be referencing a relationship yet to come, setting that up, too. Setting up that tension, setting up that kind of like knowing. But man, if they gave him a forgetful pill, that's really sucks.
Well, I mean, and again, it goes to show how even in relationships where, I mean, theoretically, if they transferred some of the things from the book, like Armand would say that he loves Daniel in the books, and yet he treats him in this like clearly hateful, torturous way for years,
right?
And here, if the two of them, if Louis and Armand were complicit in blocking a part of Daniel's entire life
memory, exactly, that's
his whole memory, giving him 40 years of thinking that everything went one way when in fact it had gone a different way.
Well, and that's the thing about all of these characters have this potential for evil and for bullshittery and fuckery. They all have that innate in them, and all of them are unreliable narrators. We don't have a reliable narrator in the bunch.
Indeed, they lie is what they do. Like even when they know the truth, they lie, but often they don't care about things or process things. Just like we said earlier about the processing of time, it's like these vampires exist on a different plane than we are, even though they interact with the physical world like we do. And because of that, the way that they understand things clearly isn't and can't be the way that we understand things. And the things that they care about and prioritize won't be the things that we care about and prioritize. And yet, they struggle like we do to maintain human relationship and to build those and grow those over time.
Communication's really challenging, Joel.
Use your words, no secrets. No secrets.
Use your damn words, Nicole.
So one other thing that I did want to mention, we mentioned earlier in the episode that this is the first call out specifically of Lestat as a brat. Of course, he's known as the Brat Prince in the novels. That was Anne's favorite moniker for him.
It's very affectionate.
Also, Claudia makes the reference to Lestat as the father of lies, which is, of course, a great line from the book, and it was used to very good effect by Kirsten Dunst.
Oh, I love it.
Version in '94 as well. So I like that call out there. Lestat doesn't get to hear it, but Louis gets to hear that barb from Claudia as they're discussing him. I love where this show is going. I think I've got a glimpse now of where they're going to wrap up this season and how they're going to head in.
I can't believe we only have one episode left.
I know. We need, and I asked for this on Twitter. I said, AMC, we've got to get timelines for the second season production. When does that start? When can we expect it? What are the timelines here? Is there going to be a spinoff? When is that coming? We need to know just so that we can manage our heart palpitations between here and when they come back.
Trying to live our lives here.
Absolutely. So, folks, we will be back next week with our discussion of episode 7, the season finale for Interview with a Vampire from AMC and AMC Plus. And we would love to have your feedback on what you think so far of this episode, but the season as a whole. How are you enjoying this adaptation?
Yes.
And we want you to join us next week as well. If you're a cable viewer, I'm sorry. It'll be another week for you, but don't
we
worry.
love you.
When
We
you
love
get
you.
caught up with us,
You're so brave and strong.
we absolutely do. When you get caught up with us on the 13th, you'll get 2 episodes to listen to that day, as you'll have episode 7 discussion, but also our season-long recap will be available that weekend as well. So you'll have a little bounty for you there next week when you get caught up.
A treasure trove.
Or a couple weeks from now when you get caught up. Until we talk to you again next week, we have been your hosts,
Ashley Wright Eiler.
and I'm Joel Sharpton, and we are the Articulate Coven. Thanks for listening to The Articulate Coven. You can join our community on Facebook by following the links in the show notes or searching for Articulate Coven on Facebook. You can subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or at articulatecoven.com. And share us with your Anne Rice-loving friends.